Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming. And welcome to Gravesend. Indeed, welcome aboard the Northfleet. Now, very soon we're going to be casting off, but before we do, Captain Knowles has instructed me to come down here today to give you a little advice regarding health and safety in the event that we should have to leave the Northfleet urgently. So, in an emergency, on instruction from any of the cast, we would ask you to leave in an orderly manner, probably through the doors through which you came, out onto deck, and wait out on the deck. Please don't re-enter the saloon here unless instructed by a uniformed officer. And in the event you can't exit through the doors by which you entered, we have alternative escape routes which will take you out onto the poop deck, and again you can wait there in comfort until things are safe once again in here. Please don't attempt to take anything with you. If you have to leave, please leave in the most orderly and urgent manner you can. Now, I'm also required to advise you shouldn't attempt to leave the ship except by conveyance of a lifeboat. Now, the lifeboat will have a sailor aboard and they will give you instructions. Please follow the instructions given by an assigned sailor.
All ashore that's going ashore! All ashore that's going ashore!
So, it sounds as though we're about to depart. So it only remains for me to wish you a pleasant voyage to Hobart. Reports indicate we may encounter some rough weather in the channel. So, if I may, I would counsel caution in selecting your meals, at least until things settle down, if you get my drift. Thank you. So events will unfold over the next few minutes. So do enjoy the evening. Now then, in January 1873, the United Kingdom was stricken with a series of bitter winter storms. Out of motion, the ships have been tossed around like champagne corks. And the crews, well, they had to find shelter wherever they could. When the storms finally abated, the skies cleared and the seas calmed, them sailors all anchored up in the creeks and bays all along the south coast. Well, they come out and they check their ship for damage, make essential repairs, and they prepare to set off down channel and out across the world. Do you know, it's been estimated that on the 23rd of January 1873, well, there was more than 300 ships, all moored up in Romney Bay alone. And one of them was the Northfleet, a three-masted, general-purpose cargo and transport vessel. Now, it's often been said, a ship in harbour is safe. Yeah, but that's not what ships are for, is it?
Read all about it! Get your papers here! Ship goes down in channel, 297 people drowned, women and children among the dead. Read all about it! Get your papers!
That's one of your papers, Chief.
Here you go, John.
Thank you.
This is going to be a very difficult day. I've never lost a ship before, I can tell you.
I never lost a husband before.
Dreadful business.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the public gallery here at Lid Town Hall. Now, I need hardly remind you that this is an occasion of the most extraordinary solemnity and sadness. and that those who attend here today as witnesses to give their testimony after the fact are demonstrating the most amazing courage and fortitude. I ask you therefore to respect their bravery in appearing here a mere 3 days after the sinking. I must also add that consumption of alcoholic liquor and use of tobacco in all forms is not permitted whilst the court is in session. Thank you. I thank you in advance for your compliance with this matter. And furthermore, according to the wishes of Acting Coroner Finn, you may remain seated when she enters the chamber. Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you for coming here in such numbers tonight. It is crucial to the carriage of justice that people such as yourselves should bear witness to these proceedings, especially when the loss of life is of such dreadful magnitude. Our sad purpose here today is to examine the facts surrounding the loss of the vessel Northfleet, sunk on the night of Wednesday the 22nd of January 1873, following a collision with another as yet unidentified vessel, with the loss of 298 lives. Now, the law requires that proceedings such as this are conducted in regard of a specific and named deceased person. Therefore, please let the record show the deceased on this occasion is Mr. Samuel Frederick Brand. Mr. Brand was recorded as travelling as a cabin passenger aboard the Northfleet. The law further requires proceedings are to commence with the identification of the named deceased. Therefore, we can also record that Mr. Brand was formally identified by his next of kin earlier today, and his body rests in an anteroom pending the conclusion of today's hearing. Now, I must remind you that this is not a court of law, in so much as I am not a judge, nor you a jury. There's no doc and no defendant. No sentences will be passed. We shall, however, hear testimony given under oath. Ultimately, I shall issue a statement regarding the loss of the Northfleet, which may or may not include judgments regarding the deceased, recommendations to avoid such tragedies occurring in the future. I shall now confirm the presence of those witnesses called to testify today. Mr. John Easter.
Aye, ma'am. Aye.
Mr. George Brack.
Aye.
Mrs. Knowles. Aye. Mrs. Sturgeon. Aye.
Get some sail upon her, haul away your halyards, haul away your halyards, 'tis our sailing time.
All present then, thank you. So let us delay no further. Constable, would you swear in the first witness, please? That would be Mr. John Easter.
Kindly take the Bible in your right hand. And read from this card.
I do solemnly swear that my testimony here today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you.
Mr. Easter, thank you for coming here to testify today. Please tell us your story in your own time and in your own words. Indeed, as they may say in the debating chambers of Oxford, the floor is yours.
Thank you, ma'am. I joined the Northfleet. I joined the Northfleet crew as bosun at Gravesend on the 12th of January. I knew the ship well from past voyages. She's a fine ship. You can't beat the Blackwall frigates. She's safe and fast and safe.
Frigate? You mean to say the Northfleet was a naval vessel?
No, bless you, ma'am. No, it's like a nickname. She looks a bit like a Navy frigate. In fact, she's a cargo and a passenger ship. Beat any vessel she can except a well-rigged clipper. Anyway, I boarded and reported to Captain Oates. I knocked on the captain's cabin, and it was Captain Knowles answered. Captain Oates had been held up in London, so Captain Knowles stepped up to take us to Hobart.
Quite a surprise, I'm sure. Were you concerned to find that your journey to the other side of the world was to be captained by your first officer?
No concern, ma'am, no. I knew Edward Knowles. He's a fine seaman, Angie brought his new wife for her first sea voyage. The captain said there were telegraph reports from the West Country and there were gales coming up the southwest approaches. And that would mean trouble in the channel. So I spent the rest of the day securing holds, sending the men up the mast, tensioning the rigging, laying out swabs and pails in the passenger berths to deal with the queue. I mean seasickness, man. That's for me, turn on busy.
So, despite the prospect of poor weather, nothing was amiss or unusual as you prepared for departure. Can we then assume the passengers were safely boarded and the Northfleet departed?
Yes, ma'am. We left Gravesend on the 13th of January carrying a pilot who was familiar with the perilous waters of the Dover Straits.
In South Australia I was born, heave away, haul away. South Australia is my home, we're bound for South Australia. Haul away, you rolling king, to the heave away, haul away. Haul away, you'll hear me sing, we're bound for South Australia. Do join in if you know. As I rolled out one morning fair, heave away, haul away. It was there I met Miss Nancy Blair, bound for South Australia. Haul away, you rolling king, to me heave away, haul away. Haul away, you'll hear me sing, we're bound for South Australia. I sugar up, I sugar down, heave away, haul away. I sugar round and round the town, bound for South Australia. Haul away, you rolling king, haul away, haul away. Haul away, you'll hear me sing, we're bound for South Australia. There's just one thing that grieves my mind, heave away, haul away. That's leaving Nancy Blair behind, and we're bound for South Australia. Haul away, you rolling king, to me heave away, haul away. Haul away, you'll hear me sing, we're bound for South Australia. I wish I was on Australia's strand, heave away, haul away. With a bottle of whiskey in my hand, and we're bound for South Australia. Haul away, you rolling king, to me heave away, haul away. Haul away, you'll hear me sing, and we're bound for South Australia. Haul away, you rolling king, to me heave away, haul away. Haul away, you'll hear me sing, and we're bound for South Australia.
Yes. Anyhow, we found the storm soon enough. Peeped out the Thames estuary. They was non-stop, they were. Great southwesterly swells, right broadside across our bows. Each day we make a few leads, then, on the advice of the pilot, Captain Knowles failed us a bit of lead and gave orders for us to drop anchor. That wasn't so bad for the tars, but the passengers, the railway men, the navvies and their families, off to build a railway line in Tasmania they were. How they suffered. The women needed comforting, the children were sobbing, white as ghosts in the lantern light, and the men were hanging over the running rails, that is, convulsing with the swell. So, fourth day, we rounded the North Foreland, and still there were gales. Soon we were passing the Goodwin Sands, and everybody knew someone who had perished in that dreadful place. Neither land nor sea they are. Sand and shallow water devour ships and bodies like a hungry dog devours sausages. Captain Knowles knew the charts, and with God's grace, 6 days after Gravesend, we passed safe with the sands a mile on our port side. Another night, at anchor off Deal, saw the Dover light winking. Through the spume, still the weather gave no quarter. 9 long days we languished in that swirling wash tub, until just after noon on the 22nd of January, we anchored in the lee of Romney Bay, 2 miles off of Dungeness. 2 miles, of course. Captain Knowles ordered us to remain at anchor for 24 hours, And that gave the crew a chance to check and repair the ship, gave the chance for the passengers to recover their sea legs. I felt sorry for Mrs. Knowles, 6 weeks married, never been to sea, and she gave it her best. Once anchored, we saw her on deck, looking pale and exhausted, but still smiling and cheerful.
So, just to be clear, Easter, we're now at the afternoon of January 22nd, just hours before the vessel is lost.
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
And at this point in time, everyone who boarded at Gravesend is, notwithstanding mal de mer, in good health and fit to continue the journey to the Antipodes, fair weather permitting.
Yes, ma'am, yes, humans, people know, are strange creatures. You agree with that. As soon as the Northfleet was settled at anchor, it was as though the terrors of the previous days have never been visited upon those brave and intrepid travellers. Couples and families emerged from below decks to promenade as afternoon turned to evening. Captain Knowles gave his orders. Riding lights were hung from the rigging to make our presence plain to other vessels. I watched as the lamps were fueled, the wicks were trimmed, and hauled up the masts. See, it's one of my superstitions. I like to see riding lights placed proper. I tell you, man, the Northfleet was lit up like a Christmas tree every night. Quite right too. Anyway, I spoke with the watches fore and aft. I took a last stroll around the deck to inspect the scuppers. The sky had cleared, the visibility was good. Probably about 3 miles. And I noted the other vessels at anchor in the vicinity. There was a clipper anchored 300 yards off, and I hailed her with a megaphone. Her first officer identified her as the Corona. We had a brief exchange and then said goodnight. I then called for a Morse lamp to contact the steam tug City of London, a couple of miles distant from us, and our conversation was brief. And before retiring below decks, I noticed a couple of brave luggers during a lull in the storm trawling for the cod that made their home in the winter months around the Ness. Rather than me, I thought. Then I was pleased to go and find something hot to eat and drink in the galley.
Thank you, Easter. Now, I shall be calling on your testimony again later, but for now you may stand down. I wish to hear from other witnesses.
Yes, ma'am, thank you, ma'am.
Get her on her course now, all away of poor sheets, all away of poor sheets, 'tis our sailing time.
Now, Mrs. Sturgeon, would you be so good as to take the stand? Constable, will you take Mrs. Sturgeon's oath, please?
Can I take the Bible? No.
Is there a problem, Constable?
There appears to be. It seems the witness can't read.
I see, no matter, I shall take her oath. Thank you, Constable. Mrs. Sturgeon, you understand that in this courtroom you're bound to speak the truth?
Yes, Mrs. I understand.
Excellent. And whatever you say, either as a statement of your own or a response to a question from me, every word must be the truth as witnessed by you. But a lie from your lips today could have very serious consequences. Is that absolutely clear?
Yes, Mrs. Quite clear.
So, do I have your solemn promise before God and everyone present today that you will speak truly?
Yes, Mrs. I promise I do.
Excellent. Then let the record show the unorthodox but entirely adequate nature of this lady's oath, and let us proceed. Mrs. Sturgeon, you faced a dreadful ordeal, yet by the gift of the Almighty you stand before this court. Furthermore, both your husband John, who is recovering from the injury sustained, and your daughter Harriet, who is, I believe, just 7 months old, also survived the catastrophe. Harriet being one of only 2 children of 48 to be rescued alive from the water. Please tell us, how is Harriet bearing up?
Yes, Mrs. We each of us were troubled by our memories. Even the little one sleeps fitfully during the night and wakes screaming. The doctor said our memories will fade, but we saw such things, Mrs. Terrible, dreadful things.
Indeed you did, Mrs. Sturgeon, and our purpose here today is to help ensure that others in the future may be spared such horrors. So, tell the court, if you would, of your recollections of the time between sunset on January 22nd and the collision later that night.
Yes, Mrs. Well, me, John and the baby, we got caught by the seasickness. As soon as we names. I don't presume to call those women and infants my friends, but it's so hard to believe that they all perished in the hours that followed.
Shocking indeed, Mrs. Sturgeon, but let's stay with your recollections of that evening. So, tell me, having eaten, did you remain in your family berth? Were you there together when the catastrophe broke?
No, we weren't, because John drew my attention to our little Harriet. She was smiling and laughing and swaying to some unheard rhythm. I listened carefully to see what it was that amused her so, and above the sigh of the breeze and the gentle lapping of the water, I heard a fiddle playing a merry tune. Well, my John, he said, sounds like the fun started in the saloon. Shall we go and join them? Well, I looked at baby Harriet. It was clear she wasn't going to be asleep for a bit, so off we went.
So, approximately what time would that have been?
Well, it was about 9:15. I know this because John drew his pocket watch and he held it in front of Harriet's face and he was laughing and he said 9:15, a time when all good babies should be asleep in bed.
8:45, thank you. Continue?
Well, when we got there, some of the other travellers had assembled there. The better weather had restored their spirits. There was singing, the air was thick with pipes made, and the fiddler, an off-duty sailor, played on. And some of the other passengers, they were drawing together a dancing
together in the saloon of the Northfleet to entertain ourselves with music, song and dance.
Hey, watch out!
The ship was at secure anchor. Since noon that day, the signal lamps were shining out from the ship's mast. Everything was very peaceful as the music began.
I saw some seagulls in a field 60 miles inland. Why they were so far from the coast I couldn't understand. Soaring, swooping, calling out the way that seagulls do. One landed a mile away and then off again she flew. Dipping one toe in the oceans, not the same as putting to sea. I've never known much about seagulls, but they don't know about me. The other birds they kept clear, 60 miles inland, like they knew that was best to do with seagulls close at hand. I've never been a sea captain or served in the Queen's Navy. I've never been part of a captain's crew singing sea shanties. Dipping one toe in the ocean's not the same as putting to sea. I've never known much about seagulls, but they don't know about me. I've never felt the ocean's anger, never heard the storm, and I've never sailed the seven seas since the day that I was born. Sailing ships on long sea trips out of sight of land, and seagulls 60 miles from the coast I'll never understand. Dipping one toe in the oceans, not the same as putting to sea. I've never known much about seagulls, they don't know about me. Seagulls fly quite so far inland, the choir singing seagull songs far from the sea and sand. Soaring, swooping, calling out the way that seagulls do. It's a lie to sigh that seagulls cry when they sing sea songs to you. Dipping one toe in the oceans, not the same as putting to sea. I've never known much about seagulls, and they don't know about me. Dipping one toe in the oceans, not the same as putting to sea. I've never known much about seagulls, sailing ships or people. I've never known much about seagulls, but they don't know about me.
Julian, now!
But now, I think Mr. Christopher Lawley is going to roll us home.
Oh, right, okay. This is a Song of the Times. Again, it has a chorus that you might be able to pick up and sing along with. Very easy chorus. Anyway. Pipe all hands to man the windlass, see our cable running clear, as we heave away the anchor, toward Tasmania we'll steer, rolling home, rolling home, rolling home across the sea, rolling home to fair Tasmania, rolling home, dear land, to thee, that we spent along with you, rolling home, rolling home, rolling home across the sea, rolling home to fair Tasmania, rolling home, dear land, to thee, and we'll leave you our best wishes as we leave your rocky shores, for we're bound to dear old Hobart, to return to you no more. Rolling home, rolling home, rolling home across the sea, rolling home to fair Tasmania, rolling home, dear land, to thee. 10,000 miles now lay behind us, 10,000 miles or more to rove. Soon we'll see the banks of Derwent, soon we'll see old Hobart town. Rolling home, rolling home, rolling home across the sea, rolling home to fair Tasmania, rolling home, dear land, to thee, and we'll sing a joyful chorus in the watches of the night, and we'll greet the shores of Hobart as the grey dawn breaks the night. Rolling home, rolling home, rolling home across the sea, rolling home to fair Tasmania, rolling home, dear land, to thee. Last time, rolling home, rolling home, rolling home across the sea, rolling home to fair Tasmania, rolling home, dear land, to thee.
Yeah, come on, Nigel. Tell us something from you. No beer in this at all. Got a name for a beer. John Barleycorn to the sea has gone in a ship both stout and new. The thirst to slake of Captain Drake and all his loyal crew, to venture break through wind and wave, the Spaniard for to hold. And though he die of Spanish grape, he'll live as English mould. So we'll cut him down and we'll bind him round, and we'll serve him worse than that. For we'll bind him down between two stones, and we'll bung him in a vat. Then we'll drink his health in nut brown ale, we'll raise our glasses high, for that he can live again. John Barleycorn must die. John Barleycorn's a courting gone, dressed in fine array, in pewter clad from toe to head, to win a lady gay. The poetry that he declaims will stand him in good stead, for the ladies fair all do declare they love it more than dread. So we'll cut him down and we'll bind him round, and we'll serve him worse than that. For we'll grind his bones between two stones, and we'll bung him in a vat. And we'll drink his health in a brown ale, and we'll raise our glasses high, for that he can live again. John Barleycorn must die. John Barleycorn's to the hangman gone, and the reason I'll unfold. 'Tis for robbing honest Englishmen of their silver and their gold. In a grave unknown by cross nor stone, John Barley will be lain.
many days have gone their way, and he rises up again. So we'll cut him down, and we'll bind him round, and we'll serve him worse than that. For we'll grind his bones between two stones, and we'll bung him in a vat. Then we'll drink his south in nut brown ale, and we'll raise our glasses high, for that he can live again. John Barleycorn must die. Yes, before that he can live again. John Barleycorn must die.
It's almost very
Oh,
good.
hang on, here we go.
48 years of living, an angel in disguise. 48 years of loving, smiling with my eyes. 48 years of memories, weeping tucked away. When daylight dies, I hail them rise and dance upon their grave. What's that sound coming from the treasure of light as black as pitch? What's that sound coming from the bureau? Do I dare tell the honest switch? Old step, drive those old fish and deadly white. I got skeletons in my closet and they rattling tonight. The cheekbones connected to deceit bone, and thereby connected to lies. While who said indiscriminately, make the sockets downstairs. And now, Alison Raymond and Susan Alexander are going to play and sing and tell us a story of a sailing boat. lie down, run around in circles till I drown. And if I had a sailing boat, would I travel so far from this place? Would you wait for me? And would I ever return? Because I've known you
Time for one more. Jen Cox, would you mind singing that amazing song, which I think is Fear Apart of the West? Is that right?
Fear apart, not bad, get back,
That's
get
not
back.
getting back.
Bit of the old tongue, mine's the home,
Good choice.
What's that noise? What's going on? Suddenly, and without any warning, a terrible sound. A sound every seafarer dreads. The sound of two ships colliding at sea. We were thrown around the saloon, unable to control our motion or the absolute dread we all felt. And here, our story pauses just for a while before we return to the courtroom presently.
The court is now in recess, if you will, Constable.
Customs, eh?
Tea and coffee will be served very shortly.
We'll be back soon.
Oh, here we go.
There we go again.
Ladies and gentlemen, I trust that you are all now suitably refreshed. We have heard harrowing testimony today, and I fear there is yet more to come. However, such is the nature of these hearings, which must, of course, be held according to law. Therefore, if the gentlemen would kindly extinguish their pipes and cigars. Thank you. I would ask you to take your seats once more as Coroner Finn is ready for proceedings to continue.
Thank you, Mrs. Sturgeon, for your testimony and indeed for your fortitude in giving it. Perhaps you'll permit me to wish you, John, and of course little Harriet, peace and strength as you strive to put the events of the last few days behind you. You may stand down. Constable, I would like now to hear from the pilot, Mr. Brack. Would you swear him in, please?
Mr. Brack, kindly take the Bible in your right hand and read the words on this card.
I do solemnly swear that my testimony here today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
George Brack, you served as a pilot in these Dover Straits for many years, and I'm sorry to say that the shipwrecks that occur all too frequently in our stretch of the Channel have brought you and I together on occasions such as this many times. George, you must surely have witnessed every hazard faced by mariners leaving the Thames for the approaches. So tell us, please, how does a good solid vessel at anchor in relatively calm water come to sink in less than an hour at the cost of so many lives?
Yes, ma'am, I have acted as, dare I say, an expert witness on shipwreck hearings before, but I never imagined a time when I should suffer the horrors of a sinking for myself. That the good Lord saw fit to place me aboard the Northfleet last Wednesday was surely a test of my faith. And that he delivered me alive from that carnage makes me think perhaps I passed that test. Or perhaps he just wanted me to be here to tell you all about it. Anyway, it seems to me that the loss of the Northfleet on that dreadful night was down to pure negligence on behalf of the captain of the steamship which struck her.
Yeah, absolutely true.
The loss of lives, on the other hand, well, that's a more difficult question, since a number of misfortunes combined to frustrate effective delivery of people from the wreck.
How so, George?
Well, at about 10:30 p.m, as we all know, a steam vessel, identity as yet unknown, struck the Norfolk at speed amidships on the starboard side. I heard her approach whilst in the saloon. A huffing and a puffing she was. Well, we all heard her of the noise of the singing and the fiddles. Fearful of what was to come, I hurried on deck where I met John Easter. The steamer was visible only as a shadowy outline emerging from the darkness. The only lights from her were the little burst of sparks from her chimney. John was waving and shouting, "Look, you fools, can you not see our riding lights?"
I think that's what I said.
Right, and I looked up and checked our lights, and they were burning clear and bright in the rigging. Then, with a terrible crash and a tearing of wood and metal, the steamer struck. As she settled, I summoned a megaphone and demanded, "What ship is this?" But was dismayed to get no reply. None. Worse, that ship's mighty engines were thrown into reverse and she backed away, making no attempt to assess our condition, nor even to examine her own hull for damage. Soon that steamer was fading into the darkness and we saw her no more. Now, I am certain that had that ship's captain posted watches, had she been proceeding at a more reasonable speed for nighttime cruising, and had she remained on scene to assist our crew, then the Northfleet need not have been lost.
Agreed.
Like I said, the loss of the Northfleet is down to negligence by that steamship captain.
Thank you. And so we move to consider the terrible loss of life, which you say is made worse by misfortune.
Yes, ma'am. The first of these misfortunes was the location of the breach in the harbour. Now, the steamer had struck the Northfleet, splitting her from waterline to deck, but even this extensive damage could be secured by the crew, sufficient to sail cautiously to Folkestone or to Rye for repair. And the initial inspection, ordered by Captain Knowles, suggested that she would indeed remain afloat, albeit badly breached. So the captain, the crew, and I myself began work to prepare to sail at first light. But there was unseen damage, and soon it became apparent that the Northfleet was listing to starboard. Further inspection below decks revealed that the midships were stove in well below the water. Water was pouring into the hold, and after 15 minutes, and with the list increasing by the minute, it was clear that she would sink.
15 minutes.
15 minutes, yes. Now, with the steamer having made a run for it, Captain Knowles ordered that the signal gun be discharged in order to attract the several vessels anchored in the bay to come to our aid. But after several attempts, the seaman had to report that the gun was unserviceable because the touch hole had become completely blocked by salt corrosion. So, Captain Knowles then ordered that distress rockets be brought up and fired. The 4 rockets were fired, and within minutes, one of the nearby tugs began moving towards us from 1.5 2 miles off, maybe. Unsuccessful attempts were made to hail the watch on the clipper Corona, which was moored just a few hundred yards away. Well, it grieves me to say this, man, but the word in the public has it that the sailor on watch had fallen asleep and was thus oblivious to all our
For shame!
Let the record show the assertion regarding the sailor on watch is hearsay. No doubt we can ascertain the truth of this claim in due course. George, please continue.
Yes, well, the old tug was still a mile off when Captain Knowles gave the order to abandon ship, and the crew began work preparing the lifeboats. But the increasing list had already rendered 5 of the 7 craft unusable. The 2 on the starboard side and the 1 on the stern, but they had become submerged as the list increased, and were long gone by the time the order to abandon ship had been given. The 2 on the port side, well, they were raised in their davits and sat perched high and dry on the hull. So, Boatswain Easter sent a party of 4 men with axes to cut the davit lines and heave them off the hull. And may I say at this point, man, that throughout this time of peril, the captain and all of his crew behaved in a calm and professional manner. I witnessed true courage that night, man. True courage as is seldom seen among men facing death at sea.
It's right of you to say so. Thank you, George. Boatswain Easter, pray tell the court how they fared this party of 4, and do you remember you're still under oath?
Yes, ma'am. It was a regret I shall bear until my dying day, ma'am. There were 4 brave men: Hans Hansen, Arthur Thorpe, John Cogan and Matia Jones.
Good men, all 4.
They were. Arthur and Hans clambered onto the bow of the forward lifeboat, whilst John and Nat went to task on the aft one. Davit lines, taut as fiddle strings they were, as they laid their axes on them. In the forward boat, Hans severed the prow line. He then appeared to move to join Arthur in the stern, when suddenly the stern line failed. Both were thrown into the sea. Powerful currents around the nest carried them away into the darkness. The forward boat crashed against the aft boat, smashing both to splinters. Now Nat, having youth and vigour on his side, he was able to scramble back onto the deck. And we watched in horror as poor John Cogan tried to find purchase on the smooth hull. I turned to pick up a life ring, but when I looked to find it, it was gone. And Matia Jones, though spared, would later go down with the ship.
Thank you, Boatswain Easter. Dreadful tale. So many in this catastrophe. George, pray continue.
Yes, ma'am. Well, in the end, just 2 lifeboats got away, those being the 2 stowed on deck amidships. And any souls left on board thereafter, men, women, and so many children, had to find their buoyancy by clinging to spars, hatch covers, anything that floated. Like I say, the steamer sank the Northfleet, but it was a run of bad luck across so many lives.
Absolutely true.
Thank you, George. You may stand down.
Hark, the storm spirit is abroad on the night, lashing the wild waves, maddened with fright. See the huge billows foaming and roaring, shivering mariners our help are imploring. Well done, brave fellows, hearts of oak coal, not a man flinches if duty call. Launch the lifeboat, breakers ahead, pull for your lives, boys, onwards ahead. Launch the lifeboat, breakers ahead, launch the lifeboat. Grasp the strong tiller, steer for the wreck. Dash o'er the wild waves, they hail from the deck. Souls they are shrieking, take pity, save some. Poor hearts despair not, onwards we come. Ah, they are near them, oh, they are lost. No, see the lifeboat skywards is tossed. Launch the lifeboat, breakers ahead. Pull for your lives, boys, onwards ahead. Launch the lifeboat, breakers ahead. Launch the lifeboat. Quick, quick, oh, save them, moments are days. Nervy your strong arms whilst woman prays. Fear not for duty, all that they can. Every true Briton will do to a man. Save, save the lifeboat, burst through the foam. Bearing her glad freight, proudly comes home. Launch the lifeboat, breakers ahead. Pull for your life, boys, onwards ahead. Launch the lifeboat, breakers ahead. Launch the lifeboat, launch the lifeboat, breakers ahead. Pull for your life, boys, onwards ahead. Launch the lifeboat, breakers ahead. Launch the lifeboat.
And so to our final witness in this hearing. Constable, could you swear in Mrs. Knowles, please?
Kindly take the Bible in your right hand and read the words on this card.
I do solemnly swear that my testimony here today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Mrs. Knowles, of the brave souls who've come to give their evidence to this assembly, your presence before us is surely the greatest testament to forbearance and stoicism in the face of adversity. Just weeks married when you watched your husband heroically go down with his ship, striving to the very last to share those who would nonetheless share his fate. The court may be interested to note that Queen Victoria herself has been moved by stories of the bravery of Captain Knowles, and representatives of Her Majesty have indicated that she plans to act in support of his widow once this and any subsequent hearings are concluded.
God save the Queen.
Will you tell the court, Mrs. Knowles, of the final moments of the Northfleet last Wednesday night, as you recall them?
Yes, ma'am. I was reading in lantern light in Edward's cabin. He was working at his desk and had a large chart spread out before him. He was wearing spectacles, I remember. They gave him an unfamiliar scholarly look, which amused me. He was using dividers and a compass to chart some future course. When the steamer struck, the items on Edward's desk were flung to the ground, and he cursed audibly. He came over to ensure I was unharmed, and reassured he hurriedly left the room. I remained in the cabin, as I felt my presence on deck may impede whatever challenges the crew were facing. After about 10 minutes had passed, I noticed that the windowsill was no longer parallel with the distant horizon. As we were at anchor, this could only mean that the ship had a list to starboard.
Forgive me, Mrs. Knowles, but it is on record this was your first experience of life aboard ship. Pray tell how you acquired the insight to make such a determination?
I may be inexperienced on the sea, ma'am, but my general education is by no means lacking. The horizon is, of course, horizontal. The sill, however, indicated that the ship was not.
Of course, to your credit, madam.
Oh. Anyway, as I continued watching, the list to starboard visibly increased. After about 2 more minutes had elapsed, I realised we were in trouble and I left to find my husband. On deck, I found Edward, Mr. Brack and Mr. Easter. A group of small but rowdy and angry people had assembled. They seemed to comprise mostly of the travellers because the crew were engaged in trying to save the vessel. Edward, George and John were standing guard over 2 small lifeboats which were prepared and ready to launch from the deck. It was clear that the travellers intended to take to these boats to ensure their own safety, but Edward would have none of it. As they approached him, he stopped them and said, "No, only women and children will board these boats." But then one of the men jumped into the nearest boat and lay in the bilges. The crowd of travellers roared their approval. My poor husband, he drew his revolver and he said to the man, "Get out of the boat now or I will draw a bead upon you where you lie." But the man said, "Well, do so then. I may as well perish here as drown when the boat goes down." Now, if you listen to the street gossips, you'll hear that my husband fired his weapon, wounding the man in his knee, but this was not so. Both George and John will tell you that no blood was drawn.
No, that's right.
And after some reflection, the man cursed very loudly and got up and returned to join his friends.
George Brack, you are still under oath. Please tell me, is this your recollection? Did Knowles draw his revolver, and more significantly, did he discharge it?
No, ma'am, he did not fire that gun. Edward Knowles was a fine seaman, an excellent leader of men, and a skilled captain. He would have known that to discharge his large calibre revolver into that craft would more likely have blown a sizable hole in the clinker, rendering the boat at best leaky, and at worst placing it beyond use in this time of crisis. It's an insult to his memory.
Thank you.
Thank you, George. Yet this was clearly not the end of the matter, since only 2 women of 52 and 2 children of 48 survived the catastrophe. Yet the boats of which we are speaking were recovered full to capacity.
Indeed, ma'am, but as the decline of the ship continued apace, the chaos spread. My husband ordered me into one of the boats, but I loudly declined his instruction. I was determined I was going to go down with my beloved. However, he ordered Mr. Easter to place me in the first boat, and then to climb on board himself. Likewise, he ensured the safety of Mrs. Sturgeon, Mr. Sturgeon, who was carrying baby Harriet and was her only hope of survival, and little Maria Taplin. Poor thing, only 10 years old, all alone now. She was so cold and distraught. Finally, as the waves crashed over the decks, the men rushed forward once more, frighteningly filling the boats to overflowing. At the last, and in despair, I saw my husband all but throw Mr. Brack into the second boat, saying, "George, you must take charge of this boat now, for without a seaman to guide them, these men are all lost. Yet it seems these rogues are to be saved."
Saves my life.
And then a breaking wave crashed over the decks, carrying both craft clear of the Northfleet. I thought we were done then, but soon we could only watch as the Northfleet's hull disappeared beneath the waves. Only her masts and rigging were in view now, festooned with people desperate to be
you may stand down. Constable, would you assist Mrs. Knowles, please?
Yeah, well done, girl. Well done. Very good.
Well done. You did good, girl. You did good.
Thank you to those who have given their testimony today. I've given careful consideration to all that I've heard, and I move to report the following statement to the Admiralty regarding the loss of the Northfleet. They will in due course consider my submission in the subsequent hearings which must surely follow. Firstly, I find that the Northfleet was in good condition, properly crewed, piloted and captained prior to the collision at approximately 10:30 p.m. on January 22nd. And that just 40 minutes passed between the collision itself and the sinking. Regarding Captain Knowles, I am satisfied that he showed excellent leadership and seamanship throughout, and that at the end he continued to strive courageously until taken by the sea. Mrs. Knowles, you can be truly proud of your husband.
Thank you.
Secondly, I'm in no doubt that the collision with the still to be identified steamer was the sole cause of the loss of the Northfleet. The Board of Trade is, I understand, offering a substantial reward of £100 for information regarding this vessel. It is anticipated it will be identified and apprehended soon. We've heard that the watch aboard the clipper Corona was asleep. Now, if this is found to be the case, it cannot be assumed that this man's inattention contributed to the loss. Had he been alert to the disaster unfolding close by, we can assert more lives might have been saved. If the watch was asleep on duty, then he was in dereliction of that duty. If further investigation confirms the tittle-tattle heard in the pubs, I shall refer the matter to the owners of the vessel Corona and to the Admiralty. Let them decide what disciplinary action should follow. 3 vessels, the tug City of London and the luggers Mary and Princess, are to be credited with saving the lives of a number of individuals plucked straight from the water, though sadly these mercies pale against the hundreds who perished. It is to be expected that the Admiralty will develop technical recommendations arising from this disaster. Recommendations which may in time save the lives of mariners and passengers on seas across the world. May it please God Almighty to speed and guide them in their work. In the meantime, we
Yeah, I've got to get in there. You've got to let me in, mate.
Stop there, sir.
Look, no, it's really
What is
important.
your...
Look, I've got to address the call.
That knock upon my door meant I broke the law. So I find myself before you in this court. The words in this song are my impression of all you legal people in all. Police officers and detectives, solicitors, barristers, clerks. The judge and the jury retire and duly deliver their verdict on what has occurred. Defence and prosecution expect prison or a fine. All you legal people help the punishment from the crime. Expert trusted advisors, court ushers and court clerks. Defendant or plaintiff find out when your name is called out from the dock and the witnesses laugh. Defence and prosecution expect prison or a fine. All you legal people help the punishment from the crime. Associates and partners, secretaries and law clerks. Attorneys at law, paralegal support. The gallery gasps when your sentence is passed. Defence and prosecution expect All you evil people have the punishment for the crime. Privacy professionals for personal confessionals. Reporters and artists record the court cast list. I hope they don't save star billing for me. Defense and prosecution expect prison or a fine. All you evil people have the punishment for the crime. So I hope that you will see from this forensic summary, I find myself before you in this court, standing here accused of something I didn't do, with all you evil people after me. Defense and prosecution expect prison or a fine. All you evil people have the punishment for the crime. Yes, defense and prosecution expect prison or a fine. So I'm pleased you legal people are all personal friends of mine.
Right, sir. Hold your horses.
Now, I just need a moment to address you people up there in the public. Who's this guy? Who is it? Now, because you see, sometimes irrefutable and attestable facts, well, they'll trump even the wildest fantasy ever to emerge from the tortured imagination of Monsieur Hugo or Mr. Allan Poe. And you, my friends, I'm glad to bear witness to one such event. Because you see, truth. Now, truth is the mother of justice. And she's in labour. Right here, right now, in this courtroom. Now, her progeny, Julian, will deliver a message both enlightening and shocking. Now remember this, my friends. However unlikely, everything you hear as our tale draws towards its inevitable conclusion, it's all a matter of historical record. Right, let's do this. Right.
Hanson, what is the meaning of this? You, sir, who are you and what do you mean by disturbing a court in session?
My name is Walston Knocker.
Thank you!
Your name's
Quite
Walston
enough!
Knocker.
Thank you! Order in the court!
My name's Walston Knocker.
There's always one. My name is
Walston Knocker.
I've got news. I've got information to which I am privy, information which I really must lay before this court.
Then proceed, sir, but be brief. If I find you are wasting our time, I shall find you in contempt of court.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, Mrs. Only you see, I'm here in my professional capacity as a solicitor. I've got offices up in Dover. Up there, I spend most of my time, well, preparing cases in land disputes and settling defaulted loans, that kind of thing. But I was most surprised, not to say a little disquieted, to receive a most unusual instruction from the owners of a clipper-rigger steam vessel by the name of Murillo.
The Murillo.
Do you know her?
Now,
Thank you.
marine matters are by no means my usual fare. Yeah, but this was by no means the usual instruction. For it would seem that the owners of this Spanish registered vessel have received news. News to the effect that the Murillo was indeed the vessel that collided with the Northfleet last Wednesday night.
Oh!
Now, not wishing to appear, shall we say, evasive, they've instructed me to come here today to tell you that they do indeed believe and accept that is the case.
They must pay.
Furthermore, they told me they do not accept responsibility for the collision.
Incredible.
Nor for the loss of the Northfleet, nor indeed for the loss of life which followed, at least pending the outcome of this and any future hearings. Now, the Murillo, along with her captain and crew and her cargo, they've all arrived safely in their destination port of Lisbon,
Oh, good for
in
them.
Portugal, and they're not expected back in British territorial waters in the foreseeable future. I, on the other hand, I'm instructed to come here today to require of you to provide me with copies of all relevant court documents, including statements from all of the witnesses here present, and that they will be presented to my client's lawyers in anticipation of future court action.
A statement from me.
Yes,
Sure.
yes, we will do
Oh,
this.
yeah, me too.
When my time is over, haul away for heaven. Haul away for heaven. Lord, be by my side. It is time to go now. Haul away your anchor. Haul away your anchor. 'Tis our sailing time.
8 months later, on the 20th of September 1873, the Murillo was passing through the Straits of Dover when it developed engine trouble. Well, unable to proceed, of course, it was detained in Dover Harbour. An Admiralty court was summoned, and the officers and the captain of the Murillo were severely censured. And the vessel was condemned to be sold. Meanwhile, the bodies of the dead continued to wash up on the beaches of Kent and Sussex, eventually totalling some 320, many of whom now rest in the churchyards of the little towns and villages in that part of the world. If ever you find yourself down in New Romney, go to the little church, big church of St. Nicholas. Walk up the aisle, and just before the altar, cast your eyes up to the right. Beautiful stained glass window commemorating all you've heard about tonight. And there in the window is the Northfleet. There on the Northfleet are the passengers, their arms raised to heaven, imploring, and from heaven there's the angels reaching down to gather up the souls of the dead and take them to glory. And I know it's a little thing, but, well, I say amen to that.
The Northfleet sailed from the
the Northfleet play, we've been running for a little while, and we don't take any profits from our production. We raise money for charity, and we have in the past till now been raising money for the RNLI. However, tonight's performance is exceptional. We decided some while ago that we would support a different kind of a lifesaver, really, which is a local charity which is presently growing. It's called the Random Cafe, and it's supporting sustainable Watford, I suppose you'd say, while also enabling possibly some of the less privileged members of our society to eat well and nourish themselves properly. So tonight's collection will be for the Random Cafe. See, we have our hat here as always, and if you wish to make a donation, you can be assured that it will be going to a very worthy Watford charity tonight. So thank you for coming. Thank you for being such a fabulous audience, and have a safe journey home. We are Walteazers. Good night.